Marcello, tu es là?
Je suis là, oui.
Bon. Il faut que je ferme ma vidéo et mon micro?
Não, attends, maintenant. Uma boa tarde a todas e todos. É com muito prazer que recebo vocês e a professora Florence Getreau para o terceiro módulo do seu curso maravilhoso sobre organologia e iconografia do cravo. Florence, bonjour. Thank you so much being with us once more and for your wonderful course. And well, now we can start if you like.
Yeah, I am ready. So welcome today. I think I will share my screen now. Huh?
Fine.
And I hope my voice is good enough. Can you hear me in a good way?
Very well.
Very well. Okay, so now I share the screen, okay?
Okay.
It is not coming. Maybe
we don't see the screen, your slide. It's what we see is your computer. Yes, now. Voila.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So now the beginning and the full screen.
Fine.
Can you see?
Very well.
Very well. Okay.
Yes.
So now we begin. It is our third course, and we will speak today about clavichord and pianoforte. I think I will first be quite short on the clavichord. I do not know if you play clavichord in your classes. Maybe, Marcello, you can tell me if your students are playing also clavichord.
Those very few who have clavichords at home, they do, but the students at UFRG, no.
Yeah, so it is quite unknown from them.
Well, and some in Recife, yes, there is Erasmo. He has a clavichord in São Paulo, sure, but maybe in Tatuí.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it is not so usual. Okay. I think in France the clavichord was rediscovered mainly in the 80s years. I speak from the conservatoire and what they played in the conservatoire. They only had access to historical clavichords in the museum, but at that time there was no clavichord to play in the classes. A prominent person organized many conferences on the clavichord. It is Bernard Brauchli in Italy. And what is a luck for us, this musician and scholar published all the conferences. So during 20 years long, he organized these meetings very regularly, and the books issued also very regularly. It would be, I would say, astonishing that a subject was not already treated. The making, the music, the iconography, the social aspects, everything you can find in this group of, as you see, more than 10 volumes. So please, I recommend that this is in each library where there is classes for early keyboards. The same man wrote a wonderful book, a synthesis of all what we know and we known in 1998. And this book is interesting because first it is in English, so everybody, a lot of people can understand. You see here the content. It's the origins of the clavichord, and then it is century by century. And for you as a musicians, there is a special chapter on the clavichord performance. I was very astonished when the first volumes appeared, because Brauchli devoted a lot of space to the finger technique, to the way to play. And he analyzed in a very important and precise way what we see on paintings. How are the fingers placed on the keyboard? And I think it is really for you as musicians very important to read the synthèse, but also the conferences books. Okay, and as you see, there is appendix also in the book, and I think it is very useful. I hope it is not out of print. I hope so. If you are interested in the subject, there was also a good work made by Clemens Ahrens and Klinke, you see, and it is in German, a bit more complicated to understand, and with special aspects on German, or I would say German areas about the instrument. You see in the content that Bernard Brauchli wrote also a chapter on the clavichord in Italy. And what I forget to say, but I don't have the book and I don't have even a picture of the cover, it is that in Portugal, Dr. Doderer, very early in the 70s, published the very first important book on the clavichord. And it is for you very important to know that, because he was Portuguese and he knew a lot on the school of making. And he pointed the fact that many instruments are preserved in the Péninsule Ibérique. Huh? So please, I will write the name and the reference in the bibliography. And if you have the luck to know people with Doderer works, be sure it is an important point. Like for all the two other causes, I begin with the treatise. And Sebastian Birdung, I already showed that plate, is showing a small rectangular clavichordum, as you see. It is quite hard to understand what are the specificities of the instrument, but we see that the keyboard is inside the case. We see that there is material to stop the sound, but otherwise it is quite, I would say, crude and very simple as an idea for clavichord. Then you have in the same treaty that I already spoke yesterday from Jacques Sellier, a small drawing from a clavichord. And what is interesting is to see the type of keyboard, the compass, and also these very special keys from the keyboard where there is different tangents. So I think you should also look at that if you are interested in the very early period. Then Praetorius, 1619, is already much more, I would say, serious, not serious, but realistic. And what is interesting is to see the three types of clavichord. Number 2 is called Italienische Mensur. It means the pitch and the string length is the usual use in Italy. But what I like also to say is that the shape, the polygonal shape, is quite typical from Italy. And we can see that it is a bit bigger than the gemein clavichord, number 3. Gemein means the usual clavichord, the mostly played. And then he's representing also a small one, an octave clavichord. It means we have 3 types of instruments. And we see that each time the keyboard is outside the case, what is not the reality if we consider preserved instruments. I would like to say that the use of the clavichord is mainly an instrument to practice at home. It's absolutely not a concert instrument or a public instrument. And it was usual for organists when they wanted to practice at home to use a clavichord. The other fact, if you never saw one example, is that the mechanism is not a plugged mechanism, but a hammered system. And you see the small tangenten, if we speak German, it is a metallic piece coming under the double course of strings, as you see very well on this drawing and on the picture, a detail of a very late instrument, but where we can see also the dampers are in material, and to block the sound after the sound was made. So it is the ancestor of the pianoforte because it is considered to be hammered and not plucked. If you think on classification of instruments, of the producing of the sound. The other question is that there is fretted and unfretted clavichords. It means that on a key, you can have or only one tangent, and then it is unfretted, and you can have 3, 4, 2, 3, 4 tangenten on the same key. And for that reason, you see that the shape of the keys are not exactly perpendicular to the keyboard. The date for this changing is that unfretted instruments appeared not before 1693. It is the first mention in a document. It means that in 16th century and 17th century, all the instruments are fretted. Yes, are fretted. And it is not so easy to play because, I mean, if you have different notes given by the same key, you can understand that you can play all the key. It does not work. The second aspect of the clavichord, maybe I should come back, is that you have a direct, I would say, when you touch the key, you can move the key, and you can make what the German are calling a Bebung. It means that you can have an effect on the sound, or more loud or softer, and you can also create a vibrato. It is very sensible to the way you touch the key. But I think this will be very good explained by Marcello later when he will translate for you what I am telling. But it is what is so interesting in the clavichord is that possibility to, I would say, fascinate the sound, to make it louder or not, and to make it vibrating more or not, the Bebung. So it is an expressive instrument. The question is, if you can change the pressure of the key, the question is to have a regular touch. Otherwise, it could be that when you play an accord, it's not right. It could be unclear. So the way to master your playing is very important in a clavichord. It is a reason why it was the best way to acquire a regular playing. Maybe your professor will also explain that as a teacher for good playing. I hope he understood what I mean. So the instruments have two always a pair of string played for the same key, okay? It's a double stringed instrument. Here on this picture, we see very well fretted instruments and an unfretted instruments. When you have an unfretted instrument, you need a key per note, and it means that your instruments will become bigger, larger. You need more space. So usually at the end of the 18th century, or at the beginning of the 18th century, instruments will become a bit larger and with other proportions also. We have quite few elements to understand how and where the instruments were built. And we are lucky enough to have at the very end of the 17th century this series of engravings and description of the different métiers, the different Hauptstände, it means in Germany, workmanship of the builders. And as you see here, usually organ builders were also clavichord builders in the same workshop. And here we see it is the case. One workman is preparing pipes for an organ, and the other one is using the tools of a carpenter to prepare probably or a pipe or a piece of a clavichord. And we see the clavichord in the underground, and the saw also. But it is quite a nice representation of a workshop. I show you this other one. It is also a series on instrumental making. Assemblage des mains ouvriers, it means workers working with the hands. And it was published in Augsburg in the 18th century. And what is very nice is that there is always a man and a lady showing instruments finished, usually finished for the lady. She's presenting them, and the man, but I don't show the men, are constructing recorders, violin, etc., lutes, etc. And the lady is presenting a clavichord, as you see. And the costume of both the man and the woman are always made with instruments. I love this series. They are really very interesting because many details are realistic, and otherwise it is a fancy way to show this very complicated métier. So try to find them online. It is really wonderful. What I wanted to show is also that the clavichords were played by young ladies, a bit like the spinets. And in the musical iconography, we find also, like for the spinets, religious subjects. For example, Maria Magdalena is very often shown at the clavichord. And we could say it is only a young lady, but no, it is not only a young lady because of this very special pot, you know, where there is a cream that she used to help Jesus after the crossing. So the documents are very interesting. The master is called a master of the semi-figures because we do not know the name of that man, of this painter. And there is many paintings around the world by his hand. It is identifiable, and you see they are very alike, these ladies, in all the paintings by him. And here you have another painter who painted, you see we are quite early in the 16th century, and the small instruments are on a table on the left, and here on the right it seems to be on a chair, or it is quite strangely presented. Brauchli was very interested in the finger technique on such documents. the articulation. And it shows that it is probably very sensible as a keyboard. A second subject to represent the clavichord is hearing. Louis, as you see here, you have the drawing and the engraving made after the drawing. And I think it is a good idea for hearing to decide to take one of the smoother instruments which exist. I mean, as you probably know, a clavichord is not loud. The clavichord is really something you are the only person to hear very well. If you are in another room, you can't hear it. Here, this engraving is, I would say, a lady playing at home, in her home. And it is quite interesting also to discover the mechanisms and also the finger technique once again. I think this would inspire you when you play very early music. Now I come to a very strange document, quite naive. And you see, we are always in the Low Countries with these documents. And this man is singing with her lady psalms, religious music. I love that document because we see very well the unfretted system of keys. We see very well the material, the red material, exactly like on modern replicas. And what is very, very nice is that the man is probably an amateur because the name of the notes, you see the letters on the keyboard are written. It means he was not a professional. And he used repère, not to be lost, on the keyboard. But it gives a good realistic impression of the ambiance, you know, at home. And they are not very funny, these people, but I mean, they practice as people practice their religion in Netherlands, you know. Another way is this one, more gentle, I would say, a young lady. And this wonderful painting by Girardot is very often reproduced, mistakenly saying young lady at the virginal. It is not. We see that immediately because the instrument has a quite narrow case. It seems exactly the proportion of an unfretted instrument. I mean, a fretted instrument. And we see also a bass gamba, not played. The person who plays the gamba is away. And there is probably also a moral significance about love. And it is quite typical of this time. Okay, now I want to say before to go to, I should stay on this picture. I want to say that the clavichord was practiced very late. For example, in Spain and in Stockholm, there was a very late school of practicing clavichord and making clavichords. And we have instruments sometimes from the 1810. It is very surprising that the use of clavichords had a very long time in some countries. I would, to this respect, say that it was very few practiced in France. I do not know why. Maybe musicians in France were not so serious as in some other countries. I do not know. Maybe they felt it is too hard or too boring to practice. Anyhow, I mean, we should not think that it was disseminated in the same way in all European countries. It is not true. If we look at inventories from musicians, for example, in Paris, there is from time to time a clavichord in 16th century, very seldom in 17th century. And I am sure that if you do the same work in Germany, you will find a lot of clavichords in the inventories of musicians and bourgeois. So I will be very happy to read the book from Maya, because maybe she found clavichords in Rio at the end of the 18th century. I do not know. Maybe, I hope. Okay, so now we come to the pianoforte, who is, I would say, the logical, in German, Nachfolger from the clavichord, because it is also a mechanism, a hammered mechanism. And if you work on this subject, there is two very important books, makers of the piano. Marta Nowak-Klingskale gave us their wonderful study of all what she found about all countries, with makers doing not only pianoforte, very often there were also harpsichord makers or clavichord makers. So this is very useful. I would say that you should also work, but I could not find the cover. You should work also on the book published in 1933 from an English lady, and suddenly I forget the name, but it is not Leslie Summer. It is a lady who astonishingly, you see, I have présupposé, because this lady was a wonderful explainer for all the type of mechanism, the evolution of mechanism in the pianoforte. She worked a lot on the patents produced mainly in England, but not only. And that book was a phenomenon at that time, and it was reproduced in the 70s. I wonder why it is not, it does not exist with a new facsimile, because it was very, very good made. Among the books on piano, there is many different types. Because of the dissemination of the piano in the musical studies, there is, we say in French, à boire et à manger. It means there is very bad books and very good books. There are books with like tea table books with good pictures but bad text. There is also catalogs of collections, and collectors did a lot of such enormous books with many, many pictures. I show you on the left, for example, the book written in English and French by Roudier, who is a pianofortist, but also a collector, and Dilena, and they wrote that book for an exhibition. And it is quite useful because you have very often, and I will show many plates from that book, the instrument and the mechanism. And it is classified by school of making, what is quite useful. On the right, I show you another series. It is a series of instruments preserved in Italy, in the Villa Medici near Milano, and the collector is Fernanda Giulini. Fernanda Giulini is a very important lady for people interested in the evolution of pianoforte. She has a wonderful collection, a huge collection in a wonderful villa, and she asked several scholars to make big books taking one maker. For example, here I show you Walter and Stein, and presenting in detail, very deeply, the 10 or 20 instruments that she collected. And for example, the book you see on the screen was written by Van der Meer, who was a prominent organologist, curator in the museum in Nuremberg. He was born in Netherlands. He spoke 20 languages. He was an important organologist. And he worked not alone. You see, it is a group of authors in the series, but it means that she wanted to have a very, I would say, serious, systematic catalog made on her collection. There is, for example, I was in charge on the book concerning Pleyel and Chopin, because each time she's associating a maker or two makers with a prominent composer. Walter Einstein, it is for Mozart. Chopin, it was the occasion to catalog all the Pleyel in her collection. And when I conceived the book, I wanted to have articles on the instruments, but also on the music, on Chopin as a man who he met and what was his life in France, for example. And there is also a book on Erard and Liszt. So you see, if you can find the series in a library, I think it is very interesting. And the collection is gorgeous. And if you are lucky to once travel in Italy, you should contact this lady. She will be very happy to welcome musicians like you are. So don't hesitate. It is really a place you can play all the instruments and you will be welcomed. Like yesterday, I show you here the cover of one specific volume we produced in 2009. It was a conference organized by Christophe Coin near Limoges, where in a castle during 20 years he organized concerts, but also conferences and master classes. And during this symposium, the whole persons coming from everywhere in the world, from America, from Italy, from Germany, came with subjects on the pianoforte in France. So it is really specific. It is 40 years of piano making, piano practicing. For example, the questions of pedaling. Once again, it was very nice to have scholars, makers, musicians together. Okay, on the piano, I should not forget to say, and it will be in the bibliography, that there were many meetings, many conferences organized by Pierre Goua, who is professor at the Conservatoire in Lausanne. He organized different conferences also on specific periods, specific schools of making, and each time there was also makers, restaurers, musicians, people from museums and collectors, and this brings really a dynamic when you approach a specific subject. I will never forget, for example, that the year we studied Mozart, we had the luck to have the Stein instrument I will show you later, the piano, clavecin, clavichord, and the instruments en vis-a-vis. There were unique moments in these symposiums. And among the books, I show here the book just published by Maya 6 years ago. And for me, I think it is wonderful that your colleague published that important book on what was going on in Rio de Janeiro. You see, all the story, and till 1830. Bravo! I am enchanted to know that that book exists, and that your specific, I would say, school of making and music is now better known. So buy that book, please. it is for me a model. You should do the same for different other countries in your continent. Okay, so now I will speak about the three, I would say, precursors. In some decades before, people said the founders of the pianoforte, but I think we have another view today, more detailed and not so, I would say, a bit primitive. And I will speak about Jean Marius, who was working in Paris, Bartolomeo Cristofori in Florence, and Godfried Silverman in Saxe. And afterwards, I will show you some specimens from German areas, then English speaking places, and the French school, because these three schools are, I would say, the typical aesthetics that were disseminated very much in Europe and in America during 2 centuries. So among the precursors, who was Jean Marius? Jean Marius was more I would say, an inventor, somebody fascinated by mechanisms. And for example, he created a special, how do you say, ein Zelt, a tent for army that you could fold and move with the army, with a good system. He was also the inventor of different types of umbrella that you can open and close. It means he was obsessed by the fact that you can fold something to have it in a smaller form, in a smaller shape and transportable. And it is why you probably, I forgot to show that yesterday, Jean Marius invented un clavecin de voyage. It means an Reisen cembalo, how do you say? Okay, a travel harpsichord. And there is...
Pardon, cravo de viagem. Pardon, cravo de viagem.
Merci. And they look like a box, like a suitcase, you know, when they are closed. There is 2 examples in Paris in the museum, one in Leipzig, one in the Metropolitan. So I think we know 5 examples, 5 specimens in the world. And he had to invent a special mechanism for the jacks, because it had to be solid, because you move it like a luggage, you know, and it could be badly regulated and badly tuned if it is not solid enough. So the jacks are in metal, and there is a tout-un system to regulate it. Okay, that was the first invention he presented before the Académie des Sciences, to be proved by scholars. And the second one was, you see, Académie des Sciences, we are just at the change of the century, and it is a special mechanic for a harpsichord and a hammered mechanic, and that is very interesting. Mécanique d'un clavecin, it means for an instrument in shape of a harpsichord, but with hammers and not with jacks, with plucking. And it means we are very early. We are in 1716, you see, and there is a description going with these drawings, engravings. He also showed to the Academy what we would say a claviciterium, but once again with a small hammer to move the string. And here you have also, you see, both systems on the same instruments. And I mean, it is quite a vision. He had a vision of what could become a new mechanism. If you think about the very late harpsichords with their buffle stops and all these systems to try to make an harpsichord expressive, and he was probably obsessed by that. You see that this invention is more later. It is already 35, and I must say that our colleague, who is an Italian working, I forget the name, but he's very he knows everything about Marius. He's the curator today in Amsterdam in the Rijksmuseum, and he wrote a wonderful article on Marius, and I think it is in the Gulpin Society journal. So we now know much more than 20 years ago about him. Now I come to Cristofori, who is the supposed second inventor of the pianoforte in Europe. And I hope you see well on the screen that the difference between Cristofori mechanic and a modern flügel mechanic from today is very, very different. And you see the shape, you see what is covering the head of the hammer. It is not the same proportions, it is not the same material. And all these facts will change the sound, change the impact on the string. So each time you look at a pianoforte, you should consider the type of, the shape of the mechanism. You should consider the material. You should consider how heavy it is. You should consider how quickly it is movable and how it comes back at the original place, and how long. So all these aspects are very well described in very different publications. I would suggest that you read in the series published by Madame Giuliani, the book on Pleyel, where Christopher Clark, who is a prominent maker, prominent restorer, who restored an enormous amount of Viennese Hammerflügel and French and English instruments, he's speaking about all that. You know, the books, I forget to say, the books published are in French, English, and Italian. So I am sure you can find the right language for you in these books. And he's explaining in detail the effect of all these aspects of the mechanism, and how the keyboards were in equilibre, and the material to block the keyboards, all this, and the strings, the type of metal, and the disposition of the metal from the bass to the treble. So if you need to have good explanations about a sort of typology of hammer covering, shape of hammers, and stringing, read Christopher Clark. He has really a concrete approach. So here you see a portrait of Cristofori. I think it disappeared. It does not exist anymore since the Second World War. It's really a pity. And what you see also on this picture is one of the very few pianoforte preserved by him. And once again, there is one in Firenze, one in Leipzig, one in the Met. So there are not so many instruments by Bartolomeo Cristofori. And they are really looking like a harpsichord. They are very thin, very sonorous as a case, and with the same type of woods. You should not consider that suddenly people were building a pianoforte directly. No, at that time there were first harpsichord makers, and they did improvements to come to the pianoforte with a new mechanism. you see there is a sort of the instrument is also in a high outside case, as you can consider here. And what is very interesting is in Firenze, they organized a conference to speak about Cristofori instruments some years ago, and to consider if it should be restored or not restored. And you probably are aware that today in many institutions we are doing facsimiles, because on a facsimile you can improve details, you can do a sort of practical archaeology, and you do not take risks on the original models. So it is a good way to understand better, but also to taste some aspects of the sounds and of the inner structure, and it is more and more the way to work today. Oh, my keyboard is not working. What I have now? Okay, it works. So here you can see the very, very simple mechanism by Cristofori, and I think we should figure that when we compare that with a modern mechanism, which is extremely complex. It means also that when you give an impulse on the keyboard, it works immediately. It is very sensible, very light, and very direct. There is no escapement on a Cristofori instrument. And now you can see here the instruments inside also, how it is constructed. There is many équerres across the case, and what is showed on the top of the photo is that it is one of the typical hammer system by Cristofori. Look, here you have 3 types of hammers, and the one we saw before is the one down there is a very strange form of hammer. It is a circle, but it is empty, and it is covered with leather. And on the right, you see the escapements. They are very simple also, how it will escape. It is at that time with Cristofori not complicated at all. So you have an immediate response when you play such a type of pianoforte. I come now to the third place where there was improvements on the pianoforte. You see, this instrument is by Godfried Silverman, a huge dynasty of makers. They were makers of harpsichords, spinets, organs, clavichords, but also the first pianoforte. And this is an harpsichord by Godfried Silverman. And you can imagine that apart from Marius, who began very early, Cristofori began around 26. In sax, it was around 40. It means who is really the inventor? I mean, people were working to find another mechanism everywhere in Europe at that time. You have here one of the very first pianoforte by Silbermann. You see also that the hammers are quite alike from Cristofori. And what is also interesting is the type of rows you see in paper, like we were used to have with harpsichords. And here, when you look at these instruments, you could say it is an harpsichord. Outside, you do not see if it is hammered or not. It is already quite late. It was made in Strasbourg in 1776. And by the way, I want to say that there was a very good PhD written on the Silbermann makers in Strasbourg by a French scholar some years ago. So it will be also in the bibliography. Among the shapes of instruments, there is also what they call in Augsburg, you see here, a Taffle Clavier. It means an instrument that you put on a table and with a very often a shape or rectangular or in shape of a wing. And there is two very famous makers, Schmal and Speth. They worked at the end of the 18th century. And maybe you remember that yesterday when I showed you the small Mozart by the Prince de Conti in Paris, I said to you that probably he played an instrument from Speth or Schmal because such specimens were in that collection, Parisian collection. Here I show you the mechanism of Taffle Clavier by Schmal. And you know, it is so complicated. I think maybe first I am not competent to comment it mechanically. It is too complicated. But I think all these drawings are in books and you can study them very intensively and concentrated. And I think it is probably good that you study that with a maker, with a professional who will explain to you that the more it is, I would say, meet intermediaries in the mechanism, the heaviest it will become, and I would say also maybe I would say the more a mechanism is complicated, you can play quickly and with more virtuosity if your mechanism is complex. It is one of the very important things improved by Erard, for example, with the Doppel mechanism. It was to repeat very quickly, and it was an aspect that, for example, Pleyel did not work. Pleyel preferred simple mechanism because it was probably more sensible, and it was what liked Chopin. I very briefly summarize this evolution. I mean, every good pianofortist knows why he's loving, for example, the aesthetic in Wien and not the English aesthetic. Beethoven, for example, tried once in his career to have an instrument from France, and he was not happy, and he stopped to use it, and even we could not find that he paid the instrument. He refused to pay it, and I think it is something very personal. Each musician is awaiting something from a typical instrument from one or the other region. Here you have also from Schmal another form, as you see, a bit stronger than before. You do not need any more a table, and it looks like a small spinet in a way, but the mechanism is a Tanganten instrument. And you could have also Flügel instruments with Tanganten. And here, each time you can concentrate on the typical mechanism. Then you have the models Hammerflügel, and Hammerflügel means it is a real hammer, and a hammer covered mainly with leather. The diameter of the hammer, how heavy it is also very important. In which wood it is made. Also, the the center of the hammer, and you see how everything is more and more complicated. What is important to say that the dampers are above in Vienna, not in France, but in the Viennese school, it is coming from above to stop the sound. And here what is interesting is to have this instrument made by Nanette and Matthias Stein. Nanette was one of the very first clavier makers. She was very good, very effective, and she signed many instruments. She wrote also on her work. And as you see also, you immediately see that it must have been made in Vienna, because the cut of the sides of the keyboard are typical from that place. Yesterday I said that one daughter from Louis XV was playing probably an instrument not French, but coming from the land of the mother, and I think it was because of the shape of the case. Here I come to a very strange instrument, a unique piece, which is preserved in Verona. And I think Stein, when he built that instrument, was improving many things. He was like an inventor doing experiences. And you see there is 3 keyboards. It is a pianoforte, but also harpsichord. And there is 2 keyboards en vis-a-vis, so you can play the instruments with 2 persons. You can register, have one or the other, or one register from one and not for the other. It is so complicated, and I would say the combinations are so many that it is really a sort of laboratory. I don't think it was a concert instrument. It is more to try to understand what is happening with the invention. And Michael Latcham, who is one of the very best specialists on pianoforte, he wrote many books and many articles, discovered that Stein changed a lot the instrument. It means he was always improving more, always trying to something new. And it is like an archaeological site, you know. He could figure all this changing in the time. Here you have one portrait by Stein with an instrument we probably we do not know if it is a clavichord, if it is maybe a Taffle Clavier, and he has in hand a tuning fork. And at the end of his life, later you see, Stein is here tuning a chamber organ. It is not so often that we have different portraits from a maker. It's quite unique. And the second person we have a portrait is Anton Walter. Here you see the work of Walter. Walter was probably one of the favorite makers that Mozart used. And you see the instrument is a bit thicker. It is the same type of mechanism quite than Stein. And here you see Anton Walter at the end of his life. He is not very welcoming. And we have this very important and famous painting showing the 2 children and Mozart father. What I love in this portrait is that the mother is on the wall. You probably remember that she died in Paris when she went she went in 1771 to see her son, who was there for the third time. And it was quite terrible for him when the mother died there. And here we see the family in 80. And you know, there is a symbol of Orfeo on the wall, the father as a prominent person. The compositions are present with the feather. So it is an important document, and we see an instrument probably by Walter. The painting is in Salzburg with the Walter instrument that we saw here. And there is exactly the same instrument here, Cook. Here is the Anton Walter preserved in Salzburg. Another one is in Vienna. They are very simple, as you see. And many of them are recorded. So if you want to have an idea how it sounds with the dampers above and the way to register also, it is not complicated. In Vienna, there was later makers like Johann Schanz, and you see they are more decorated. They have this bronze applique on the stand, but also in the front board. And all the variants in preparing the hammers and stringing them are very well known today. You can even buy a copy of such instruments. You have also Brodmann as a very good prominent maker. This is an instrument that belonged to Weber, Carl Maria von Weber. And you see the number of pedals. It means the way you can register with softer tone. You can have also without dampers. You can have some instruments with a drum underneath. And this is usable for Turkish music, what is a bit fancy, but in salons, it was quite usual at the beginning of the 19th century. And some small glocks also, how do you say, bells with the drum. So each pedal is acting one of these register. You see that going on in the time, you have bigger and stronger instruments in form, but also in bracing inside. The hammers will become heavier with more material on them. And progressively we come to Konrad Graf. Konrad Graf is the period of Liszt. It means stronger instruments, louder for bigger rooms, up to 1840. It is the beginning of the recitals from virtuosi. And if you have a recital in a concert salle, it is no more a salon. You need more power, strong instruments, and they are, I would say, dicker in German, heavier. And the number of pedals are increasing also. And here you have one instrument by Graf. The real instrument is preserved in Vienna, in the Kunsthistorisches Museum. And this painting is a sort of, I would say, a fantasy. It is the dream of a Parisian salon. I will explain why. But you see Beethoven bust on the instrument. And Beethoven is a sort of god for pianists at that time. Liszt is improvising. There is Paganini and Rossini, the two Italians of this Parisian group. You see Victor Hugo, and then you see Georges Sand et Dumas. and at the feet of Liszt on the floor, Marie Dagou, who was the lover of Liszt. The music sheets are readable. We can read the names. There is, for example, Esercizi by Czerny on the floor. Czerny was the master of Liszt. He learned with Czerny, and on the music stand of the Flügel, there is a piece by Beethoven. Everything is symbolic on the painting, and it was an order from Conrad Graf for his salons, for his where he was selling the pianoforte. So you can imagine that when Dannhauser prepared that painting, it was like to make publicity. And the drawings, preparatory sketches, are preserved in the Albertina in Vienna. I could collect all the drawings showing each person before it became a painting. The painting is today in Berlin because the Nazi took it away from Vienna during the Second World War. It is a reason why you can't see it anymore in Vienna. Here is the portrait of Conrad Graf, the maker. You see, he's very rich, and Metternich is on the fireplace there. It means he was in good connection with the power of the time. He's really a businessman, but he's showing himself with a compass and technical drawings of pianos. It means he wants to be remembered by the posterity as a good prominent merchant, but also somebody who is creating and working with scientific aspects. He's not only a hand worker. Huh? From Conrad Graf, we have also this very typical, I would say, Viennese model in shape of a pyramid. And you see that the meuble, the furniture is unbelievable, huh, with this, comment on dit, Kerzhalter.
Castiçais, em português.
Yeah, and there is the eagle from the politic power of the time of the land of Vienna, and you see it is luxurious. It is really something to show I am very rich, and I show my power to my audience. This is not an instrument for musicians, and it is more an instrument for a salon. Later, the firm Bösendorfer began already, and you know it is today one of the very, very important firms still producing in Vienna. And Giraffenclavier, also this was also a way to have an upright instrument. It is very useful if you have a small apartment, and very good to listen to you because you have the sound coming direct in your ears. And the shapes are so different. Look, Lyra Clavier, everything was tasted. And finally, for small ladies, bourgeoises, you see a pianoforte in shape of a boîte à ouvrage. I would say it is more a toy than a musical instrument. Okay, maybe we have a short pause, and Marcello will explain what I said. So
Laurence, sorry.
I put my screen away.
Okay. I'm not so sure if the pause will be short, because there is so much information, so much interesting information, so I'll try to do it shortly.
Yeah, do it very shortly, and I drink some water. Huh?
Okay,
I stay near to you.
Ok, fine. Bom, minha gente, então vamos lá. A primeira coisa que ela pediu para lembrar vocês é em relação à bibliografia. Ela está preparando, não vai ser hoje, então nós temos os e-mails de todos que estão assinando as listas de presença. Aliás, um lembrete, por favor, assinem a presença de hoje. Então, assim que ela mandar, ela vai preparar com toda calma. É uma bibliografia valiosa, como vocês já perceberam e podem avaliar. Então, a gente vai mandar para vocês por e-mail, né, em breve. Bom, a primeira parte ela falou a respeito, ela mostrou várias publicações, né? A primeira a respeito do clavicórdio, do Bernard Brauly, de 1993, depois de 2013, conferências, né, que ele reuniu, depois um livro de 1998, que vai desde as origens até o século XIX, imagens com os dedilhados. Então, é um autor que ela recomenda muito, né? E ela chama a atenção que, na França, por exemplo, só a partir dos anos 80 é que o clavicórdio entrou no conservatório. Depois, uma outra publicação de 2003, de Arens e Klinker, também um livro com vários artigos, e ela mencionou também o Dodler, Gerhard Dodler, o livro dele sobre clavicórdio. Bom, depois ela começou para a parte dos tratados, então ela mostrou novamente o Virdum, de 1511, com o clavicórdium, depois o Cellier, de 1583, aquelas fontes, os documentos em que se vê as imagens de um clavicórdio, né? Depois o Pretórios, 1619, já bem mais realista. Então, o Pretórios mostrou 3 tipos de clavicórdio: poligonal, a forma usual, e o clavicórdio octave clavicórdio, né? E ela chama atenção para o fato de que os teclados fora do instrumento que seria uma coisa irreal. Naturalmente, o clavicórdio, o uso era doméstico, não para concertos, e era uma forma muito comum para um instrumento muito comum utilizado pelos organistas para o estudo. Aí o mecanismo, naturalmente, é uma tangente de metal e é um instrumento ancestral do pianoforte. Aí ela mostrou os 2 tipos, né? O clavicórdio ligado ou não ligado, fretted e unfretted. Então, no ligado, até 4 cordas tocadas pela mesma tangente, e no não ligado, unfretted, uma corda por tangente. E ela menciona que, a partir de um determinado momento, século XVII e XVIII, todos os clavicórdios seriam ligados. Depois ela falou de um efeito muito comum no clavicórdio, que é o bebo, que é o vibrato, quer dizer, é aquele controle que a pessoa tem da corda quando está tocando, através da tecla. Então, pode fazer mais forte, menos forte, e isso gerando a expressividade característica do instrumento. E, em termos de estudo, né, como a igualdade do toque é necessário, então ela chama atenção para o fato de ser um instrumento bastante importante. Naturalmente, os clavicórdios não ligados precisavam ter as dimensões maiores por conta de ter maior, né? Depois a gente viu uma ilustração interessante, que são os organeiros construindo clavicórdios. Então, essa relação era frequente. E aí, assim como no caso da espineta, a gente vê várias jovens moças tocando na iconografia, né, tocando clavicórdios, com temas religiosos também. Ela mostrou no caso da Maria Madalena. E uma imagem interessante, 1730, de Augsburg, uma construtora, uma moça, mostra o clavicórdio finalizado, e a roupa dessa moça é feita toda de tubos de órgão, vocês devem se lembrar. Então, é uma imagem bem curiosa. Continuando, algumas gravuras que falam da escuta, né, do ouvido, por conta também do volume pequeno do clavicórdio. Depois, uma imagem que ela considera curiosa, dos Países Baixos, 1646, um homem cantando salmos num clavicórdio ligado, não, desculpe, não ligado, e através das letras nas teclas percebe-se que se tratava de um amador. Depois, uma imagem conhecida de Du, que é uma moça tocando o que se achava que era uma espineta, mas na verdade é um clavicórdio. Desculpe, um virginal, mas na verdade é um clavicórdio, pelas dimensões do instrumento. E, finalmente, ela menciona assim, o fato interessante de que, em certos países, como a Espanha ou a Suécia, né, ela fala em Estocolmo, que a escola de construção e de prática permaneceu até bem tarde, até 1810, por exemplo, que é surpreendente. E também ela observa como o clavicórdio esteve pouco presente na França. Era bastante raro na França, ao contrário da Alemanha. E ela especula o porquê disso, não tem certeza. Enfim. Bom, depois ela entra no fortepiano. Então, o piano forte, sim, é o seguidor, quer dizer, é o instrumento que veio a partir do clavicórdio. Ela menciona obras da Martha Novak Klingskale, que ela recomenda. Depois, uma autora inglesa, vamos conferir o nome com ela, Luciana Câmara postou, que talvez se trate de Rosamund Harding, vamos ver. E ela menciona uma coisa, quer dizer, pela proliferação, a proliferação de livros de fortepianos, né, que alguns muito bons e outros muito ruins. Ela recomenda o livro de 2003, de Rudier de Lena, desculpe, e a obra do Van der Meer, que foi curador em Nuremberg, editada pela Fernanda Giulini, do Villa Medici. E, aliás, é uma pessoa que ela recomenda a todos, quem tiver interesse específico no pianoforte, fazer contato, parece que ela recebe muito bem. É uma coleção enorme de instrumentos e edita várias obras, como ela falou. E aí ela menciona a relação de Liszt com Erard e de Chopin com Pleyel e publicações também que estudam essa relação. E depois, em 2009, uma edição da revista que ela dirige, Musique, Image, Instrument, do pianoforte na França, em 1780 a 1820, um congresso que aconteceu em Limoges, então, com artigos bem interessantes, novamente no site do CNRS ou do Musique Image, aliás, CNRS Editions ou do Musique Image Instrument. Bom, depois a gente teve o livro da Mayra Pereira, nossa querida colega, que está aqui presente. Então, a Florence mencionou como ela ficou encantada quando ela chegou aqui no Brasil e descobriu a existência dessa pesquisa da Mayra, como é uma coisa importante e que devia servir de modelo para outros países, fazer um estudo com essa seriedade e profundidade. Bom, uma coisa interessante ao contrário do que se pensa, isso tem sido revisto, né, como ela falou, essa questão dos precursores do fortepiano, né? Então, ela menciona, em geral se fala em Christopher, mas ela menciona o Jean Marius, francês, que era um inventor, na verdade, fascinado por mecanismos. Então, ele estava fascinado por mecanismos que abriam e fechavam como uma tenda para exército, ou tipo de guarda-chuva, etc., etc. E ele foi o criador do cravo de viagem, profissão de voyage. Então, com exemplares, só tem 5 no mundo, parece, Metropolitan, Leipzig e Paris. Muito bem. E aí tem vários documentos, né, da Académie des Sciences, e 1716, do Jean Marius, com um cravo, no formato de cravo, mas com mecanismo com martelos, né? E também um clavicitérium com mecanismo de martelo. E uma outra imagem de 1735, na qual se vê ambos os sistemas, no mesmo instrumento, com plectro e com martelos. Então, ela considera o Jean Marius um visionário. Depois ela abordou o Christopher. Então, grande diferença, né, com os instrumentos modernos, a aparência de um cravo, um instrumento muito leve. Bom, enquanto isso, ela mencionou ainda uma publicação pela Fernanda Gellini sobre Pleyel, o livro de autoria do Christopher Clark, que está em italiano, francês e inglês. Aí, voltando ao Christopher, ele tem alguns poucos exemplos, instrumentos remanescentes no Metropolitan, Nova York, em Florença e em Leipzig, né? E ela mostrou um retrato dele que foi desaparecido na Segunda Guerra. Uma outra coisa que ela observou, a caixa externa do instrumento, como nos cravos italianos. E uma coisa importante também, né, é que a posição atual, que é muito mais importante construir facsímiles dos instrumentos do que propriamente restaurar, que as restaurações sempre envolvem riscos. Então, o mecanismo do Christopher é muito simples, direto, imediato, sem escapamento e com 3 tipos de martelos que ela mostrou. Depois ela chegou no Silverman, já bem mais tardio, em 1740, os martelos semelhantes ao Christopher, as rosáceas em papel. Ela mostrou um belo instrumento construído em 1776 pelo Silverman, em Estrasburgo. Em seguida, ela mostrou o Taffle Clavier, quer dizer, o piano de mesa, formato regular, no formato de asa, depois construído por Schmal, em 1770, o formato à direita um pouco curvo. Depois ela fez uma observação que eu acho bem interessante, e eu acho que até estimulante para a maior parte das pessoas que se interessam, né? Ela disse, olha, os esquemas dos mecanismos são muito complicados, eu não me considero habilitado a falar sobre eles. Eu sugiro que quem quiser estudar mais profundamente, que o faça junto de um construtor. Então, olha aí, César Guidini, William Takahashi, Abel Vargas, os nossos construtores, e a Mari, então, que ajudem os nossos interessados estudiosos para entender esses complicados mecanismos. E ela menciona que quanto mais complicado o mecanismo, quanto mais complexo, mais virtuosística podia ser a música ali tocada. Então, que no caso do Pleyel é muito simples, no caso do Errar, mais complicado. E ela lembra que Beethoven não gostou dos instrumentos franceses, né? E aí ela lembra também dessa relação muito pessoal entre o intérprete, o compositor, e os construtores. Depois, um piano de Schmal, com os pés, de 1770, que lembra uma pequena espineta, um tangente em flügel. Aí, o Stein, 1775, já é um fortepiano. Ela lembra que na escola vienense os abafadores vêm em cima. Depois a gente viu um instrumento da Nanette, do Matheus Stein, de 1794, 1802. E aí ela chama atenção para um detalhe importante, que são uma maneira fácil de reconhecer os instrumentos vienenses, é o fato de que aquela parede ao lado do teclado ser uma diagonal, ser cortada. Então, é uma maneira de identificar os instrumentos vienenses. E ontem ela já falou a respeito disso, numa das pinturas que ela mostrou. E, muito bem, depois ela mostrou um piano de Stein, de 1769, um exemplo interessante, que é um piano forte e um cravo no mesmo instrumento, com 3 teclados. Então, naturalmente, foi uma invenção para se experimentar. Ela menciona o Michael Latcham e um artigo, agora não me lembro se é artigo ou livro, enfim, um estudo dele a respeito do Stein, que era um construtor que estava sempre mudando. Ela mostrou um retrato do Stein, um retrato interessante do Stein afinando um órgão de câmara, e que é uma situação única, né, na iconografia. Depois ela falou do Anton Walter e o retrato, e Walter, em 1789, era o favorito de Mozart. E aí tem aquela pintura famosa, que muitos devem conhecer, da família Mozart, 1780-81, que está a mãe, o próprio Mozart, o pai, Leopoldo, e a mãe está na parede, no retrato. A mãe havia morrido em Paris, foi uma coisa traumática para Mozart, então a Florence se destaca, ela gosta especialmente desse aspecto da mãe estar representada no quadro, mas na parede, que estava falecida. E o instrumento é um instrumento construído por Walter. Finalmente, instrumentos tardios, como o Chantz, de 1810, muito decorado, Brodmann, que pertenceu a Carl Maria von Weber, de 1810, com vários pedais. Aí tem um caso interessante, talvez alguns não saibam, que os pedais muitas vezes acionavam tambores, registros diferentes, sinos, para tocar música turca, que estava em voga em Viena na época. Depois o instrumento de Böhm, 1815, a gente foi percebendo, visualmente, os instrumentos vão ficando mais pesados e maiores. Depois o instrumento Graf, de 1838, que era o preferido de Liszt. E aí o motivo é aquele que nós conhecemos, das salas de concerto, aí, não mais os salões, mas os instrumentos passam a ser utilizados nas salas de concerto, com dimensões grandes, então a necessidade de mais volume. Aí vem um quadro muito lindo, naturalmente uma fantasia, que ela chama ela considera assim, um sonho de um salão parisiense. Então, Beethoven está presente num busto em cima do piano, depois Liszt improvisando no piano, aí se vê Paganini, Rossini, os italianos famosos em Paris, Victor Hugo, o grande escritor, Georges Sand, escritora também, mulher de Chopin, o Dumas, escritor, e junto de Liszt está Marie Dagout, que era amante de Liszt. E na partitura, quer dizer, reconhece-se no chão, tem exercícios de Czerny, né, que foi professor de Beethoven, e no piano, de Liszt, e no piano vê-se uma obra de Beethoven. Depois um retrato de Graf, de 1838, e aí tem uns casos assim, exóticos, eu estou dizendo exótico, ela não falou, que é um piano pirâmide de Graf, de 1829, bem luxuoso. Depois o Bösendorfer, de 1845, que ainda é uma firma atuante em Viena, né, produz grandes pianos de concerto. Depois tem um Taffle Clavier, de 1840, um Lyra Clavier, de 1840, e, finalmente, uma mesa de costura e pianoforte, que ela diz que é mais um brinquedo do que propriamente um instrumento. Bom, é isso. Florence, voilà.
Me revoilà.
Bon, j'espère que je n'ai pas fait de faute. Je n'ai pas trop inventé, tu sais.
Bon. Alors, on va passer au chapitre suivant.
Très bien.
Et donc, on va essayer d'avancer vite. Que dit Maria à Aida Barroso?
Florence, maybe now we could check, before you continue, we had Luciana Câmara, she wrote, if this English author you mentioned, 1933, if it's not Rosamund Harding.
Yes, it is.
Okay, fine. So Luciana.
Yeah, thank you so much that you find the name. It is Rosamund Harding. And I had the luck when I was a very young curator that she went in the museum in Paris, and I met her, and it is an unforgettable meeting. Yeah, so thank you so much. Okay, so now I think I will share my screen once again and try to be in time.
Fine.
And now I come to the English school, le mécanisme. You see here a drawing that was published by the Maison Erard around 1840, and they show the mécanisme de Vienne. It means what we saw from Walter Stein, etc. And then the mécanisme anglaise. Here it is mécanisme anglaise will be very, very used not only in London but also in some French pianoforte. And for example, in London, you see these very light, small square pianos, since in the second half of the 18th century. And it is a moment to say that in Paris, many English instruments were imported during the second half of the 18th century. It means if you look at the inventories of musicians and even of harpsichord makers, like the Blanchet or all the published inventories published by Madame Verlet, you see that there was groups of English instruments to be sold. Here you have something very interesting. It is the way your instrument can be completely closed at the bottom, at the top, pardon. At the top, you close your case, and progressively you have a small pedal, and you can open half of the small piece of the cover of the lid, and you can totally open. It means you have three different ways to use your small quartz piano, and this will have an effect on the power of sound. And I must say, Pierre Gouat, who is, as I said, professor for harpsichord and pianoforte in Lausanne, during one of these conferences in Lausanne, he played for us, turning his back to the public, and we could not see his face, and he played and improved the three ways to open, and it was fantastic, the difference, you know. And there is some instruments where you can progressively open the small cover on the right of the instrument. So it is like in an organ, you know, this effect of growing up the sound. So you see here the system of pedals for dampers or not, for una corda or not. I forget to say that you can play one string or two strings together, and this is the reason why it is written on the music una corda. It is softer. And on the right, you have this system to open or close the cover of the instrument. Here you have another system by Haydn Beyer, who was also a maker in London. And a very prominent firm was Broadwood, and later Broadwood and Son. You see that even square pianos had progressively more and more keys on the keyboard, progressively to 6 and 6.5, and they are bigger and bigger, and they have a more important stand, and the furniture aspect can be very simple or very decorated. It depends the price you want to give to the firm. Here you have pianoforte in wing shape, Flügel, and the system of pedals also are quite clear. You have here, if I could see, I think it is 3 pedals, and you already see that there is a system of metallic shapes at the rest plank to solidified because of the pressure of the strings. They are always bigger in the story of making. Look, in 10 years, how different it is. From this shape to this shape, heavier, larger, and you can imagine that this is, for example, an instrument for a bigger concert room. Sorry. Yeah. Square pianos were mainly played by composers when they worked at home. But look, exactly like in Vienna, there was also instruments in the shape of a cupboard, very tall and very practiced for apartments. And even look this shape, like a fan, it is unbelievable. But people liked it. It was more for a fancy salon. Now I come to France, and the earliest preserved pianoforte is from 1770, as you see. It is signed by a German person who emigrated in Paris, Jean Mercken. Mercken is the very first maker active in Paris in the 18th century. It does not mean that there was no pianoforte before. You have to remember that in the concerts spirituels, these public concerts where music was given in the Tuileries when the opera was breaking in the how do you say Ostern in English? Las Pascuas. Also.
Pascua.
Yeah.
Pascua.
There was no more opera during that weeks, and to replace the opera, there was public concerts of religious music and of instrumental music, with sometimes some solist singing also. And it was a place from 1730 to the end of the Ancien Régime to show new instruments, to play new pieces, and to make the publicity for improvements. And there was already pianoforte played by the Concert Spirituel up to 1752. It means what they played. They played English instruments, imported instruments. And as we saw by the Prince de Conti, imported instruments also from Germany or from Viennese makers. So Mercken is the first one. We have a very good small book written by an amateur who has already 5 instruments by Mercken. He collected all the documents, archives documents, and a catalogue of the preserved Mercken instruments. One is, as you see, in the Conservatoire des Arts et Métiers. And what is lovely is that, for example, in this painting by Vincent, the lady is playing a Mercken. And the famous portrait of Boyer-Dieu by Boilly, preserved in Rouen, when you can come very near, you read on the name board, Mercken à Paris. So he was quite well known, as you see, at the turn of the century. Another good maker was Pascal Tasquin. We know very well Pascal Tasquin because he was the official tuner and maker of Louis XVI in Versailles, and he was the author of many ravalements, as we saw yesterday. He transformed, and he was the man who invented not only the genouillère, but I forget to say yesterday that he placed a 4th register on harpsichords with buffle. Buffle is leather, very soft leather, and this was to imitate the first pianoforte. So you have to imagine that at the very end of the 18th century in Paris, there was a deep concurrence between such harpsichords equipped with genouillère to change the tone and to try to have a sort of orchestral effect, growing the sound, not only with from the 4th foot to the tutti, but also with per moment effects with the buffle imitating the tone of a pianoforte. And Tasquin built also such pretty instruments for example, for the king, for Versailles, but also for Messens. You see on this pianoforte that there is also genouillère, like for a piano, to register. You do not need to handle that with your hands. The problem with these instruments by Tasquin are the dampers, because they are coming on the strings quite loudly, and musicians very often are disturbed when they play for the first time on a pianoforte by Tasquin. They have difficulties to master the coming down of the dampers, if I can explain. There is it is noisy, the mechanism is noisy. So you have to be very light and very conscious of what you are doing, so that when they come back down, we do not hear them. Here you see the mechanism à pilote simple that Erard produced and used several decades long. It is quite simple, as you see. And here are the two founders of the Erard firm. You have Sébastien on the left, who was the eldest, and on the right, Jean-Baptiste, who was more, I would say, the organizer, the man who was singing at money, and Sébastien was more the inventor. And together, they did a wonderful job. You know that they opened a firm in London during the French Revolution because they worked for the nobility, and Sébastien get a patent from Louis XVI. The revolutionaire looked at them, and they had to emigrate very quickly, not to be killed, you know. But then they developed in London a second firm, very specialized also in harp making. They were very famous there. We should not forget that Sébastien Erard was always looking to mechanize his instruments. For example, this harpsichord is preserved in the Musée de la Musique. It is a clavecin mécanique. It means there is many genouillères and a complicated system, mechanical system to register. It means he was obsessed, Sébastien Erard, to find ways to let the fingers on the keyboards and to change the sonority of instruments. Here is the mechanism of this clavecin mécanique with 4 stops, and it is, I would say, the summum of you could have with a harpsichord at the end of the Ancien Régime. As you know, Erard deposited a patent for the double pilote, and you find that type of mechanism in the grand pianoforte, but also in small square pianos. They were very, very cheap and disseminated. And as I said, composers as prominent as Grétry, they composed at the square piano. The long instruments were more for concerts and public occasions. You see here, for example, Langlais. Langlais on the left was a professor for piano in the Conservatoire, and he was in charge of the musical library, but he was also a composer. And on the right, the very famous Paisiello, painted by Madame Biget-Lebrun, is also inspired when creating music on a square piano. And Madame de Montgeroux, I showed that portrait because I love the story of this lady. She was the very first professor for pianoforte in the Conservatoire in Paris. And they gave her the class of boys pianists, not of girls. There were girls also, but they had other teachers. So she was a strong lady. She wrote also a very good method. And her method was that we should play pianoforte like we sing. It should imitate singers. It must be with emotion and dynamic. So I would like to show now the improvement of different mechanisms and to show that we will progressively come to bigger instruments. They were very used, for example, in the houses of Malmaison, toutes les maisons impériales et royales. It means for the First Empire society under Napoleon, such instruments were very cared, and many instruments are preserved in castles, as I said, Compiègne, Malmaison. You see the system of pedals. There was la pédale douce, a sort of material is coming between the hammers and the string. There is also on such instruments by Erard at that time, sometimes like in Vienna, a small drum or small bells, and it is there is a special pedal for that. And you can put all the dampers away. You can play una corda or due corde, and it means we have few idea how different it could be in tone, you know, with so many registration. Here you have the bearing of one of the very first model. It is quite light. It is astonishing light as a structure. And yeah, Erard was permanently improving new things and presenting them as a patent, because the system of patents exists since the French Revolution in Paris. And this is the specimen he sold to Beethoven, but Beethoven never paid it and played it a very short time. He was not satisfied. It is preserved, as you see, in Graz. Later in the 70s, you see that instruments are becoming a bit, how do you say, more solid, and the aspect, outside aspect, is following the mode of furniture with bronze. This is a new mechanism, quite complex. And here is another painting showing Erard, probably painted by Rebrun. It means when he was in London. This is another drawing, quite funny. Quel beau nez rare, quel bon nez rare, quel bon Erard. If you understand this, this humoristic, you have to say it loud. Quel beau nez, what a rare cap. What a rare nose, and then what a good Erard, quel bon Erard. Tell it in French. And it was made in Rome by a student at the Académie de France, you know. Now we come on the right to the Escapement double, and this is the very famous Escapement double, patent by the brother Erard, used everywhere afterwards, and even today. Apart the fact that that Pleyel stayed with the mechanism à pilote simple in his pianos, also Flügel, and Chopin did not like the double échappement. I suppose because the instruments were too heavy already, and he preferred the play aesthetic. Here I show you in detail this double escapement to play quicker and to have an immediate response when you come back to the same key. I show you here Madame Récamier because you see on the salon a square piano and a harp, both by Erard. And it is clear that the taste of the court, Napoleon court, had a huge effect on the dissemination of Erard models in the society. Here is the son of Sébastien Erard, Pierre Erard, and it is important to know that Pierre Erard was a good friend of Franz Liszt, and it is with him that Liszt was in touch when he stayed in Paris. Here is Franz Liszt, a wonderful painting preserved in the Musée Carnavalet, just before that Liszt went in Italy and flew away with, as we saw on the painting from Dana Rosa, with Marie Dagout. You know, they flew away. Marie Dagout was already married with children, and she left her husband for Liszt. And they went very quickly in Switzerland and then in Italy. And it was the beginning of the permanent, I would say, concert tours of Liszt all over in Europe, and the beginning of what we call a recital. It means a unique musician playing the whole concert and not sharing the time with a singer, a horn player, or a quatuor. Liszt was the inventor, if I can say, of the recital with only one musician. You have here an Erard Frère built in 1832 in London, and you see how heavy it is now. And there is what we call the fourth table. It means a second sound table on the normal table, and you see also the metallic frame appearing in the 30s to, you know, because the strings and the hammers and the bracing are so heavy that you have to control better the static of the instrument. So you have this brace in metal. Also, the square pianos are becoming bigger. And sometimes you have an English mechanism inside. It means it was not because a new system appeared that the others disappeared. No, there was all the models proposed in the catalogues of the Erard. We have also to be conscious that there was an enormous amount of tutors published during the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century. All the ladies, everybody had a piano. It was like to show we are now quite rich, we can buy a piano. And there was even a tax on pianos. There was a popular song in 19th century telling, hide your piano forte if you don't want to pay. It was a popular song. And because of that, Erard began to make some pianinos. It means upright pianos. Roller and Blanchet were the inventors of upright pianos in 1823, if I remember well. And I stay by Erard because the more we go in the century, the more the instruments are enormous objects, as you see here. And I mean, we are so far from the piano en forme de clavecin. They are very strong, very heavy, very loud, but this one are not for concert halls. They are for very rich bankmen with a salon. Here also, look, it is in Vernon in a castle, and Erard had a special workshop for painters, and the drawings, the sketches for each type of decor, Rococo, Chinoiserie, 18th century, classic, etc., were proposed to such customers, to rich customers. Look, this stand is unbelievable. Huh? It's quite heavy, but what you see is that the metal framing is even more generous here. Huh? So it is a new aesthetic. And here you can see a very important instrument conceived by Pierre Erard with the help of Liszt with a pedal. And you have two types of piano pedalier. You have the type where the pedal keyboard is in a way independent from the piano and with his own string system. And you have the system where the strings are actioned by the pedalier. And it is what you see here. Huh? And this one was specially ordered by Liszt to Pierre Erard. And there is correspondences where they speak about the improvements of that. They were very near. And here you have even a combination with an harmonium and a piano, what is quite enormous. And it is preserved in Weimar, where Liszt was at that time. And it was a time he became very religious, and it is understandable that he wanted to have this aesthetic of the harmonium also. Here you have another patent for a piano pedalier, not by Erard, you see, but by Laudet. And I think we don't have a real instruments by him preserved. It was maybe only a project and not realized. Now I come to the dynasty Pleyel, and what is interesting is Erard, Sébastien Erard was, I would say, first a mechanician, somebody interested in mechanism, mechanicien. But Pleyel was first a musician, and it is an enormous difference. And it means that he had an immediate feeling for the playability, the sound, the personal aesthetic, and he was really very present in, I would say, building an aesthetic, another aesthetic. This portrait is preserved in London in the Royal College of Music, and scholars are debating if it is really Ignace Pleyel. I think so. I am quite sure it is him. I love this portrait. And he's concentrated. There is a small square piano in the Hintergrund. Also, here you have an Ignace Pleyel quite early, from 1809. And okay, they are not so different from the Erard at that time. But what will begin to be more clear is later. You see, this is already quite early with a square piano, but later, I think they wanted to stay, both Pleyel, Camille and his son, with a simple movement mechanism, because I think it was under the fingers more sensitive than the double escapement. And you see here, it is written Haydn, I think there is also Beethoven. I forget. Maybe do check. I forget. But anyhow, he's showing himself as a musician and not as a maker, as you see. Here you see this grand piano, but with simple escapement. What is quite typical is, look, when you look at the keyboard, you see the hands of the musician, because the instrument is not closed, like for example in English pianos, or and Erard had this metallic copper curve, but here you have nothing, so you see very well the way the musician will play. And you have here a famous drawing showing Chopin with his Pleyel. And one instrument that Chopin used, but the stand is not original. And it was by later in the 19th century by the firm Pleyel as a sort of trophy to remember the fame of Chopin. But it was not the propriety of Chopin. It was only played once by him. And you see the metallic frame. There is, it is already quite important. Not so heavy as a Erard, but okay, we are already in 38. And here I show you the Gazette Musicale, where the very few concerts, public concerts of Chopin are recorded. And it is even an article by Franz Liszt, what is very interesting. You know that Franz Liszt wrote even a book on Chopin, a very positive book where he's describing, I would say, the spirit of musical spirit of Chopin. You have to read it. It is wonderful. Chopin was somebody playing only with very few people in private salons. He hated concerts. It is exactly the opposite of Liszt. Look, this is Jean-Jacques Eigeldinger, is a prominent scholar in Genève, who wrote many wonderful books on Chopin and Pleyel, on Chopin and his friends, on Chopin and the musicians of his time. So read Eigeldinger, you will be very happy. Eigeldinger published also the Clavier bien tempéré from Bach, annotated by Chopin, because Chopin played a lot of Bach. So you have in the books about Chopin and Pleyel, all these concerts with the programs and the critique, and they are very important and very few. Oh, I'm sorry, my document is not clear. It was to show the firm Pleyel in the middle of the century, with the concert hall, with the building where you could buy an instrument, and the workshop. Ah, here, you see, coming by Pleyel and Company. Entrée de la fabrique, it means from the workshops. And I already spoke about the upright pianos. Here you have the patent on the left, and on the right, a fine lady showing the specimen. We are in 1827, you see. And Roller et Blanchet, it was the association between, very strangely, a painter. Roller was first a painter, but a very good organizer. And Blanchet was the last member of the Blanchet dynasty harpsichord makers. And they created together this firm, and they were very effective and became very rich because of the upright piano droit that they patented. Afterwards, everybody imitated the Roller et Blanchet system. Here is Roller, autoportrait, a very nice man. And another prominent maker in Paris, aside from Erard Pleyel and Roller et Blanchet, was Jean-Henri Pape, like a pap, a strange name. And why is that man very important? Because he was an inventor. He invented, for example, a system for the water on the roofs. He invented a system for metallic shoes. And among the patents, he is the man who invented the pianos with hammers covered no more with leather. It was the first time that hammers were covered with feutre, a special feutre with a special mix of different materials. So if you need to know who invented the modern hammers of piano, it is Jean-Henri Pape. Jean-Henri Pape was also somebody very imaginative, and he made, for example, a piano bureau. It is what you see here with a drawer, you know. You can pull out your instruments, pull it inside, and it is like a table if you close it. And he did a piano guéridon. It means you can drink tea on that table. You close your piano and you drink coffee or tea. And he had also this very, very pretty model. You see, small. It is an upright, but the strings are underneath and not at the top. Here I show you how strange and different could be patents at that time. And there is hundreds and hundreds of patents registered in France. And I will finish with the American school only so that you figure that, for example, Steinway in Hamburg exported the firm also in New York, and it is still today Steinway and Sons, and it is a story in itself, the story of Steinway. And look, in 1860, there is still square pianos already still built. It's unbelievable. They are, for me, a bit like monsters, but I should not say that. And this is, I think, my last document, the summum of maybe Le Chant du Cygne from square pianos in America. And I think I will stop there. It is my last document.
Okay, Florence, thank you so much. Well, I will translate and then we come to the questions, right?
Yeah.
Bom, minha gente, então vou fazer a tradução, um resumo dessa segunda parte. Então, ela começou com a Inglaterra, 1840, o Erard, que usava a mecânica inglesa, né, diferente de Viena, também na França, e os pianos de mesa mais leves. Em Paris encontravam-se muitos pianos ingleses importados, né? E esses instrumentos, há vários registros desses instrumentos vendidos em Paris. Depois tem uma imagem interessante, que são as várias maneiras diferentes de abrir o piano, né? O square piano. E ela menciona, né, ter ouvido pelo Pierre Gouin num congresso, como que isso interfere no som, né, que foi bem surpreendente. Depois, Broadwood, 1815, percebe-se o piano de mesa com mais notas, né, vai aumentando a extensão. Depois, um Broadwood no formato de asa, com 3 pedais. E ela observa, né, em 10 anos, aí eu mostro outro instrumento de 1827, o quanto que o formato, o quanto que o instrumento se modificou. Ela chama a atenção, né, das imagens, dos retratos dos compositores tocando o piano de mesa em casa, né? Aí mostrou um piano de armário, piano oval, E um construtor, o primeiro construtor de pianos em Paris foi o Merck, em 1770. Mas antes já havia pianos sendo tocados em Paris no Concert Spirituel desde 1752, mas eram pianos importados da Inglaterra. E aí um retrato bonito de uma moça tocando o piano Merck, 1793. Depois o retrato do compositor Boieldieu, também reconhece um instrumento de Merck, de 1799. E depois um piano do Pascal Tascan, de 1788. Tem um aspecto de cravo, mas era um piano. E ela chama atenção para o fato do Tascan ter inventado a joelheira. E ele buscava efeitos, né? Então, por isso, a invenção da joelheira e depois de um coro, né? Um registro de coro para imitar o piano. Mas é um instrumento que tem problemas com os abafadores, eles fazem muito barulhos quando acionados. Então, para se tocar, tem que ter muito cuidado. Depois, no caso do Erard, os dois fundadores, Sebastião, que era propriamente o inventor, e Jean-Baptiste, que era mais o administrador. E depois foram para Londres, e Londres construíram harpas também. Aí ela mostrou um cravo mecânico, clavecin mécanique, com muitas joelheiras, e aí ela observa que o Sebastião Erard estava obcecado com essa questão de troca, né, com a troca de sonoridades, né? Depois tem ela mostrou vários quadros, né, de compositores compondo e se deixando retratar no piano de mesa, como Grétry, Langlais e o Paisiello. Bom, continuando, ela mostra um retrato interessante de Madame Mongeroux, que foi a primeira professora de piano forte no conservatório, e, entre outras coisas que ela falou, uma observação, uma citação dessa senhora, que escreveu um método, inclusive, que o piano deve imitar os cantores, né, em busca do cantado. Depois, novamente, um outro exemplo de um piano na forma de um cravo, com pedais para buscar diferentes sonoridades, e às vezes também tambores e sinos, então um pedal doce, um na corda, duas cordas. Depois ela mostra aquele piano vendido a Beethoven, que nunca pagou e não gostou, e observa também, a partir de 1820, os pianos muito mais sólidos. Depois ela mostrou um retrato de Sebastião Erard e uma caricatura muito divertida em que o autor anônimo brinca. Então, bonnet rare, que significa boné raro. Então, é um jogo de palavras com o nome Erard, né? Bom, depois ela menciona que Chopin não gostou do duplo escapamento, possivelmente por ser mais pesado, e uma imagem emblemática da Madame Recamier, onde se avista um pianoforte de mesa, Erard e uma harpa no mesmo ambiente. E aí ela mencionou, né, a amizade entre o Pierre Erard e Franz Liszt, mostrou aquele belo retrato de Liszt, de 1830, e ela lembra, né, que Liszt começou viagens pela Europa inteira e foi verdadeiramente o primeiro a criar a forma recital, né, quer dizer, ser um único músico tocando numa mesma noite, numa mesma ocasião, né? Depois, os irmãos Erard, em 1832, constroem em Londres. Aí ela observa a moldura metálica no piano. O piano de mesa de 1836, Erard também com mecânica inglesa. E os muitos métodos de piano, naturalmente, para suprirem essa grande quantidade de gente, moças, enfim, pessoas que cultivavam e tocavam o piano. Depois ela comentou uma coisa interessante, né? A questão dos impostos, né? E que os pianos eram taxados e que então havia uma canção famosa, né, de como esconder um piano numa casa para fugir dos impostos. Depois, o Erard Desculpe, peraí. Aqui eu não estou entendendo minhas anotações. Peraí, porque, claro, vocês sabem que eu anotei, porque como é que eu ia lembrar disso tudo, né? Depois, que os pianos, ela mostrou muitos pianos errar decorados, né, como um de 1855, e que havia assim, como se fosse um departamento na errar responsável pelos vários tipos de decoração, né, que naturalmente não serviam tanto a músicos, mas mais a amadores ou pessoas ricas, né. Ela mostrou também um piano interessante com os pés torneados, assim, parece até uma coisa meio futurista, de 1855. Depois, um piano interessante, né, construído pelo Pierre Erard, né, em colaboração com Liszt, um piano com pedais como se fosse uma pedaleira, né, de órgão, como se fosse, não é uma pedaleira, e que havia dois tipos, né, uma pedaleira independente, que acionava um jogo de cordas diferente, e nesse caso que ela mostrou, que acionava a mesma corda do piano. Depois, um outro caso interessante também, que é um piano e harmônio, né, e possivelmente influenciado por Liszt, que adquire, a partir de um determinado momento da vida, uma grande religiosidade, né? Depois ela chama atenção, quer dizer, a diferença entre o Pleyel e Erard, o Erard sendo mais mecânico, né? Eles bem diferentes, e o Pleyel sendo músico, mais interessado numa nova estética e construindo instrumentos mais leves. Ela mostrou um piano de mesa de 1809, um piano em forma de asa com escapamento simples, de 1838, aí uma outra imagem de Chopin tocando o Pleyel, e depois um instrumento de 1839 que a Pleyel emprestou a Chopin, ele usou num concerto, e um instrumento de moldura metálica. Depois ela mostrou da Gazette Musicale as informações sobre concertos de Chopin, o livro de Liszt sobre Chopin. Ela lembrou o quanto que Chopin tocava Bach e a grande diferença entre Liszt e Chopin, né? Enquanto Chopin preferia tocar em ambientes pequenos, nos salões, Liszt era o grande virtuoso que gostava de se apresentar para um grande público. Aí ela recomendou, possivelmente está na bibliografia dela, as obras de Eigel Dinger, um grande estudioso, né, sobre Chopin, sobre o Pleyel, então obras importantes a serem lidas. Aí ela mostrou a Salle Pleyel, em 1855, e outros construtores, né? E aí o Rollet e Blanchet, importante pela patente do piano de armário. Depois ela menciona o Jean-Henri Pape, né? Importante por ter sido inventor de martelos com feltro, e depois um piano hexagonal, entre outros, né? Que fechando dava para beber chá ou café, enfim, as curiosidades, né? Dos instrumentos. E, finalmente, nos Estados Unidos, o piano Steinway, né? Que de Hamburgo foi para Nova York, e ainda em 1860 a Steinway ainda construía pianos de mesa. Então, minha gente, basicamente é isso. Antes de passar as perguntas, Florence, I would like to check with you. When you mentioned Villa Medici, you said Milano, but I think it's Rome, right?
No, in Rome is the Villa Medici de l'école française de Rome.
Okay.
And the other from Madame Giuliani is a small castle near Milano. And
right, okay.
It is another branch of Medici.
Okay, thank you. Bom, vamos ver. Rita Cabuz. Thanks a lot, Florence, for your course. I love the precious material that you showed us.
Okay.
A comment by, she loved your material and it was precious, and thank you so much. Rita Cabuz, harpsichordist. Then Ana Cecília. Merci infiniment, Florence. C'était magnifique le cours.
Elle est adorable. Merci, merci ma chère. Je te vois pas, mais je pense à vous tous.
Oui. Et Well, I think tem mais alguma pergunta, algum comentário que alguém gostaria de fazer? Agora é a oportunidade. Lembrando a vocês que a bibliografia vai estar disponível, né, daqui a alguns dias. Pergunta da
Moi aussi, je
Luciana.
veux faire une photo. Moi aussi,
Ah oui,
je veux faire une photo avec tout le monde sur l'écran.
Très bien. Attends, Florence, il y a une autre question. Luciana Câmara tem uma pergunta? É isso? Ah. Florence, another question. In the 19th century, the actions on the pianos were quite different. How was the process to get to just one action, which is used nowadays?
Why do we have only one action today? This is the question?
Yes, how was the process to get to just one action as nowadays?
I think because the action à double échappement from Erard was appreciated everywhere and had a world success. And all the firms used it later. So it is today the actual mechanism. And if we consider how strong and powerful and I would say athletic are the grand pianos today, it is strange that they are so uniformed, I would say. There was much more diversity and I would say, yeah, the diversity in till I would say 1870. Okay, there was at the beginning of the 20th century steel instruments with chord parallel and not crossing to save space. It means, for example, les grands cordes parallèles d'Erard are still very appreciated by some musicians. But what is quite evident is that, like the sound of orchestras, there is a sort of nivellement, like a sort of international style, if I can say, okay? So the patent by Erard was a definitive change because everybody used it and all the pianos were equipped with it. You know, the time of Pleyel staying with his simple mouvement est révolu, c'est terminé.
Okay, thank you so much. Bom, então eu acho que se não temos mais nenhuma pergunta, Florence, I think, temos outra, another question. Can we? Okay, César Guidini. César Guidini, harpsichord builder, he would like to know, to ask your opinion about the sound, very doux, moelleux, from the Pleyel piano from Chopin compared to the sound from the Erard at the same time.
Yeah, I think we are now at a time where there was wonderful restorations of both types, of Erard and of Viennese, of Pleyel, and we can judge these differences today again, because there is some historical instruments perfectly restored, respectful, and we can understand why it was really so different to be a lover of Liszt on a strong and powerful Erard or Viennese instruments, and to be amateur of intimate music like Chopin's music in a small room with 20 people or 30 people. I think we have now the possibility to comment on dit, live that, to erleben, huh? What is so specific. And I think to play in a right way Chopin is really, I would say, I suffer, I must confess, I am terrible, but I confess that I was on Monday at a concert in the very nice Musée de la Vie Romantique in Paris, a house from the painter Schaeffer. We saw these wonderful portraits of the time, of the Romantic time. And it was a Bösendorfer. It was not an imperial Bösendorfer because the room was too small. But this Bösendorfer was much more too soundful for such a place. And the type of interpretation was so athletic, so loud, I suffered the whole concert. I confess. I think there is very few pianists today playing on modern instruments who have a delicate sound and who are capable to play Schubert or Chopin in their, I would say, genuine aesthetic. I am not against a modern piano, but I am against an athletic style of playing. Okay, it is very personal. I am sorry, but the question for me is, yes, there was two different major aesthetics in the 30s, 40s of the 19th century, for good reason, because the temperament of the composers and players were so different. And it is not the same to play in a room where there is 1,000 people and a room where there is 40 people or 60 people.
Ok, thank you so much. Bom, eu acho que agora a gente encerra as perguntas. I think we are coming to the end of the course, Florence. I would like to repeat, thank you so much for this wonderful course. Thank you so much for your collaboration, for being with us. It's so important for us to have such a course and to have somebody like you with us, you know. And as I said on the first day, we had such good memories from 2005 when we were here in Rio personally. Yeah. And this time we enjoyed so much, but there is no substitution to, that we be together personally. So we do hope that next time we can invite you to come personally and that we can have a wonderful course and we can have this wonderful meeting at the Botanic Garden.
Yeah, I loved it. You know, I want to apologize to all who were online with us during the 3 days, because sometimes I was unclear. My English is not good enough, and to explain in theory so complicated things like mechanisms or gauge, strings gauge, or all these aspects, it is better to be in a room with the instruments and to open and to look together. So I am very sorry that sometimes it was probably ununderstandable for many people. Sorry. And I will prepare for you the bibliography. You know, I go in Germany for 1 week, and if I am not ready this night, you will get it in some days. Please care, how do you say, patient, and you will get it.
We will wait okay? Very patiently. And well, I think speaking about the English, it was okay. It was no problem. I spoke to many people who attended the course. It was great. No problem at all. And once again, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup, Florence. C'était vraiment un grand plaisir. J'espère qu'on se voit
Bientôt.
Très, très bientôt, oui. Merci,
Oui.
merci beaucoup. And this thank you, I'm sure it's from all the students who now can't speak as I can speak, but I'm sure this thank you is from everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Merci,
you are
merci.
so kind. So kind. And don't hesitate to write me. Huh? You have my email and you can put your questions. And if you want a special section in the bibliography, tell it to me, I will prepare. Okay?
Thank you, Florence. Bom, minha gente, então a gente vai encerrando. Eu agradeço a todos todas a participação, estarem aqui com a gente. E, naturalmente, convido a vocês agora às 17 horas. A gente tem um tempinho para dar uma descansadinha. 17 horas a gente tem a mesa redonda 2, uma mesa redonda com um assunto incrível, super atual, com colegas que vão trazer uma discussão, uma reflexão super pertinente e importante para a gente. Então, convido a todos. E não esqueçam, lembrem-se, às 19 horas a gente vai ter o nosso encerramento e, claro, a gente não pode estar na Fiorentina, como a gente sempre fez ao longo desses anos, mas a gente vai estar aqui próximos de vocês e vamos comemorar esse encerramento da Semana do Cravo com uma sessão, a gente chama de sessão comemorativa por conta dos 200 anos. Tem umas surpresinhas para vocês vão gostar. Então, espero vocês às 17 horas e depois às 19 horas. Gente, um abraço, obrigado.